Waiting for it. There it is. We are live. The Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law. And like we discussed in previous episode, it has nothing to do with inflation and everything to do with transitioning our economy to unreliable energy. And we asked the question, why does the left reject nuclear power? Also, the World Economic Forum, the biggest advocates of the Great Reset, seem to be scared of us. We talk about this and more in episode 359 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendall. Joining me today, I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing great. I saw on Twitter on Tuesday night from an account called Election Wiz, the election wizard, Donald Trump has now ended the Clinton, Bush, and Cheney political dynasties. Not too shabby.
Nice. Jim, what do you got there behind you? What is that, a little postcard? It's got a nice looking face over there. Yeah. What is that?
That's our benefit dinner, which is coming up on October 21st. That's a Friday, so it's not too far away. And that's Yeonmi Park, who is a escapee from the prison state and the most miserable place on earth, North Korea. And we're giving her the Heartland Liberty Prize, which seems a minor token compared to what she's had to endure in her life. But it's going to be a very special night. If you want to learn more information, go to benefit.heartland.org.
Fantastic. Also joining us for the third week in a row, Justin Haskins, editorial director at the Heartland Institute and co-author of Glenn Beck's latest book, The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of 21st Century Fascism. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing really well. I didn't realize it was 3 weeks in a row. Is that right?
That's right. Last week you came in like halfway, so we're counting it.
Oh, that's right. Okay. I came in halfway, which sounds about right. So, okay. But, I'll take it. 3 weeks in a row. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Oh, no one cares. Also, Chris Talgo, senior editor at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
Doing good, Donnie. And I just wanted to ask you who designed that amazing postcard.
It
looks like a genius.
Yeah, probably some really handsome guy. I'm not really sure. You can't really tell that from the design by itself, but. So anyways, let's start off. Jim, you already kind of referenced this a little bit, but I do want to start off with a moment of silence for Liz Cheney's political career. Okay, with that out of the way, before we get going, I want to put that message out to all of our listeners. That 99% of you are still only listening to the audio version of the podcast. I understand. But if you want to join us a day earlier on Thursdays at noon Central Time, you can. We are streaming on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Rumble. A whole bunch of places. If you look for us, you will find us. And you can be in the conversation. You can put your comments and your questions in there in the live chat. Maybe we'll show your comments on screen like the one right here. Maybe we'll answer your questions on the fly. We'll see. And also, just, make sure to hit that subscribe button, write a review for us. It really helps break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from getting into more eyeballs. So, gents, like I mentioned in the intro of the podcast, and forgive me if I'm going a little quickly here. We got a lot to talk about, and we got Justin on the show, so that means we're going to go long on all of our topics. But as I mentioned in the intro of the podcast, the World Economic Forum, biggest advocate of the Great Reset. If you're a constant listener, you know by now that what the Great Reset is. You know the work that Justin and I have done specifically on it, what the Heartland Institute has done in general to expose the World Economic Forum and their globalist goals. And this past week, there's been two things that have been brought to my attention. The first one is an opinion piece written by a managing director at the World Economic Forum, published by the Globe and Mail. The piece is titled How Own Nothing and Be Happy sparked a misinformation campaign that targeted the World Economic Forum. So in this piece, the author explains how conspiracy theorists and anti-Semitic extremists have used an article published by the World Economic Forum to make the World Economic Forum look bad. So the article in question was published by the World Economic Forum in 2016. It was authored by Danish MP Ida Auken, and it was titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." So I will mention that this article that I just read the headline of is not on the World Economic Forum website anymore. They took it down. So if you look for it, you're not going to find it. You have to find it via archive.org. But regardless, so this article, the author discusses how the article went viral. It was probably Russian propagandist campaign, it says somewhere in this, and sparked a series of conspiracy theories. And there's a paragraph I'm going to read from this that I think was like designed in a lab. It's the perfect mixture of straw men, things that are crazy, and things that are true in an effort to make everything seem crazy. So I'm reading straight from this article. It says, users on Twitter and Facebook, for instance, have spread doctored content to promote the falsehood that through the Great Reset, the forum is advancing pernicious depopulation efforts. These include racist conspiracies that claim white people are the primary target of depopulation. And bad faith actors has also targeted the forum's coverage of the circular economy, economic systems that aim to eliminate waste by reusing raw materials rather than disposing of them, decrying it as a top-down agenda coming from unelected globalists looking to reshape the world in their image. There are just some examples among many. So that last half of that paragraph is not misinformation at all. It's absolutely true. In fact, the quoted part, unelected globalists looking to reshape the world in their image, I'm pretty sure was either authored by Justin or me specifically, so I wouldn't be surprised. But the point of the article is to suggest that misinformation is so rampant and that it represents a growing problem in society. And the author ends the piece with the following statement, and then I'm going to throw it to you, Justin, for your reaction. The author writes, "It also highlights how misinformation derails free speech. At the request of Miss Auken, the forum removed all media around her piece because of the online abuse and threats she has faced. Action to prevent lies being accepted as truth can help avoid similar situations and promote genuine free speech, allowing us all to freely exchange ideas and opinions. In a world where the trolls often win, more forward-thinking conversations like the one Miss Auken tries to initiate will be tarnished." So, Justin, I want to start off with you because you're the one that sent me this piece. What was going through your head when you sent it to me?
Well, I think there's a few things here. The first is, and I've actually had some communication with people at the World Economic Forum, mostly through social media, and I've gotten the same kind of similar kinds of comments about how they understand the concept of misinformation and free speech. And I think this is a perfect example, especially at the very end of this, of how so many people, elites especially, look at free speech and what it means. Free speech, they'll be the biggest champions in the world of free speech. They'll say free speech is essential and that it's necessary, that everybody have access to free speech, and it's a human right, blah, 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 blah. That's what they'll say. But then what they'll also do is say, well, but free speech means you should have the ability to say things that are true, but you should not have the ability to say things that are not true. And the problem with that sort of free speech is who decides what is true and what is not true? Well, the people who are the ones making these statements are the ones who claim that they're going to do that, right? So then what they do is they tie in any kind of like in this case, for example, where they talk about the prime minister or the minister of parliament here who writes this article, people criticize it, and then she gets tons and tons of criticism. So she says, I want to take that down. Mm-hmm. And that is somehow now people silencing her. Right. When in reality, it's not silencing anyone. It's just people criticizing her for saying something that she wrote. And because they're saying that the criticisms aren't valid, that's a form of rejecting free speech. You can see how just totally insane all of this becomes when you adopt this approach. And yet that is the approach that these people want to take on social media, in the press generally. It's incredibly, incredibly dangerous, because if we live in a world where the only speech you're allowed to have is quote unquote true speech, and the only people who get to decide what's true are the people who are often the ones getting criticized, then the only thing you're ever going to be allowed to say are the things that they let you say, which is not free speech at all. And that's exactly what this person is arguing for in this piece.
Right.
And what's really crazy about it is this topic in particular, the title of the article, which nobody who criticized it wrote. They wrote it. The World Economic Forum or or Miss Auken, they wrote it, is that in 2030 or in the future, or whatever, you'll own nothing and have no privacy, and you'll like it. Right. If you write that statement, you can't complain when people are like, wait a minute, what? The whole point of them writing it, writing an article this provocative, is to get attention. Then they got attention, and got so much attention that they pulled the article down, and now they're crying about it because they got too much attention for it. Yeah, it was negative attention. I mean,
remember the attention thing, because I want to get back to that. But yeah, it's just like, we're just an academic organization that explores ideas. Don't at me, bro. Like that's entirely what this article was. And here's a good video of Klaus and the rhetoric that he routinely uses, speaking on behalf of a collection of the most powerful and influential people in the world. This is the type of things that Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, has to say. Go ahead and play one of these clips, Andy.
Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the state of the world.
Come on.
But two conditions are necessary. The first one is that we act all as stakeholders of larger communities, that we serve not our only self-interests, but we serve the community. That's what we call stakeholder responsibility. And second, that we collaborate. And this is the reason why you find many opportunities here during the meeting to engage into very action and impact-oriented initiatives to make progress related to specific issues on the global agenda.
All right, stop the clip. Jim, I mean, he starts off saying that we design the future. We all here have the tools to design the future. And then when they have an article published on their website talking about what the future could be, and then they freak out when people talk about it, what are your thoughts about all this?
Listening to that clip and thinking about this subject this morning as we were getting ready for the podcast today, I recalled that line from the character Verbal Kint, played by Kevin Spacey in The Usual Suspects, where he says, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince the world that he did not exist. And here we have the World Economic Forum basically trying to convince the world that they and their agenda doesn't really exist, that it's a conspiracy theory, that their agenda, this says at the end of that clip, of, our global agenda. They say, no, there really is no global agenda. These are not really just plans. These are just goals. You see, Klaus Schwab has dedicated his life to bringing together world leaders to try to find a better way to make the world a better place. Yet they have it right here on film. And in fact, we don't have a clip of it today, but we've played, I think, clips of this in the past, because Klaus Schwab has admitted that, the World Economic Forum, under my direction, has been able to install as the leader of several countries around the world, people who are basically the disciples of the World Economic Forum and our globalist agenda, including Justin Trudeau in Canada, that absolute piece of garbage down in New Zealand, Jacinda, I forget her last name, Barrett, maybe I think it is. She is a real piece of work, that one. So again, they try to convince you that this is all, it doesn't really exist, that if you talk about what the World Economic Forum's agenda is, if you listen to the words of Klaus Schwab and repeat them to other people, you are a crazy conspiratist nut job. And they are, again, they're trying to pull off the trick that they don't even really exist when they do. The World Economic Forum's agenda, which is clear to anybody who even just takes a cursory look at it or watches video clips like we just shown or listen to a podcast like this, is that the World Economic Forum's agenda is anti-freedom. It's anti-individualist. Again, they talked about not self-interest. We as free market libertarian types around here, we believe that pursuing your self-interest within the law actually helps society as a whole. These World Economic Forum globalists believe the exact opposite, that your free will, you living your life the way you think is best for you and your family, is a dangerous thing, and it makes the world worse. They believe this to their core. And so their agenda is to basically make nation states meaningless, to make your individual and national sovereignty meaningless. And they mean it. And to say these things is not a conspiracy theory. This is an important conversation. They always talk about having a global conversation. Let's have a global conversation about this, about the World Economic Forum. I think people are going to start to wake up, and I think they better, for all of our sakes.
Yeah, no, you're right. Even in that clip, he talks about how like we all have to do something, stakeholders have to do something to help the community, which when he says that, he's obviously using the word community in replacement of the collective to just kind of mask this inherent socialism, all of the stuff that he has to say. But Chris, I mean, I've personally talked about this article that used to be published by the World Economic Forum. Welcome to 2030. You have no, you don't own anything, have no privacy, whatever. And I like make it a point to not misrepresent it, to not take it out of context or whatever. But this article seems to be just lumping me in with all of these anti-Semitic, far right-wing conspiracy theorists. I mean, that's probably the goal of the article, right?
Well, I think the goal of the article is for the World Economic Forum to portray itself as the victim in this, and I think that this is part and parcel to what the left, does both in America and across the globe. Whenever you attack them, they play victim. So instead of defending their policies or defending, their ideology, they immediately pivot to, well, I'm a victim and you're an oppressor. So it's an easy way for them to try to always, get out of these debates, because I think they know that if the debate is about the issue, that they're going to lose the debate. And the World Economic Forum, they put out that article, and they should have to defend that article. I mean, that is their policy stance. So I find it very strange that they put the article out, and then the article gets, blowback in the article, and the authors, are questioned as to why are you putting this out? This is not what the people want. And then they say, well, now we're the victim and we claim victimhood, and you can't criticize us, because if you criticize us, then you're, anti-Semitic or racist or whatever. So this is just a pattern that I've seen occur time after time after time throughout the past, few years. Whether if you criticize Barack Obama, you are racist, even though it had nothing to do with his race, just criticizing his policies. If you criticize, Elizabeth Warren, then you're, anti-woman, just on and on. I mean, the examples are endless.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I think that we have to not play that game and say, no, this is not about that. This is about the policy. And we're talking about the policy, and really try to stray from, what they want us to get into, and not go into the mudslinging, and just stay very much policy oriented. That's what I try to do. And, it's difficult to do sometimes, but I think that it's a strategy that, will benefit the right over the long haul.
So the second piece that kind of relates to all of this that I want to bring up was brought to my attention by a constant listener, Abel Windsor, who's probably in the chat over there on the right now. And it's a piece from the World Economic Forum titled "The Solution to Online Abuse: AI plus Human Intelligence." Now, the piece in and of itself is interesting. It talks about how artificial intelligence can be used to detect online abuse, probably similar online abuse is the one that's being experienced by the World Economic Forum right now, I guess. And it's incredibly dystopian, and Justin and I will probably have more to say about this in future videos, but I want to focus on just the opening 2 paragraphs of this. So, Andy, when you've got this link ready, show it up on screen. because it starts off, this is before the actual article starts off. It has a 2-paragraph disclaimer. And it says, readers, please be aware that this article has been shared on websites that routinely misrepresent content and spread misinformation. We ask you to note the following. 1, the content of this article is the opinion of the author, not the World Economic Forum. And 2, please read the piece for yourself. The forum is committed to publishing a wide array of voices, and misrepresenting content only diminishes open conversations. So after seeing these first 2 paragraphs, it made me wonder, like, is the World Economic Forum scared of us? And I don't necessarily mean like us on this podcast or the Heartland Institute specifically or anything, just like us as just like the general population. Are they scared of us? Because up until we started covering the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum largely flew under the radar. And now, like, the term the Great Reset and even the World Economic Forum is common in the conservative, Republican, libertarian lexicon. So, Justin, what do you think? We're shining a light on them. Are they afraid of that light? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the other day when we were on the phone, I told you I'm struggling because in the past I viewed. So first of all, I had no idea before we started looking at the Great Reset. I had no idea who the World Economic Forum was. Okay, no clue who they were. I heard of Davos, and World Economic Forum is the one that puts on the Davos conference every year. I'd heard of that, but I really didn't know that much about the World Economic Forum. Then once I started learning about them and realizing how well connected they were, how powerful so many of their members are, the kinds of language that they were using that supposedly we're all lying about, even though we're just direct quoting them all the time. Things like, to achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. That direct quote that comes straight from the World Economic Forum's own website, from Klaus Schwab himself, that whole thing, which is supposedly all just a giant conspiracy theory. When I started seeing all of those things, I came to the realization that no, actually, these people are incredibly, incredibly, incredibly dangerous. But there have been times lately where they just seem kind of pathetic.
Yes, that's the word I was going to use.
They just seem kind of pathetic. Like every little insult, every little slight, everything that happens, they're terrified, they're scared, they're worried all the time. Was it in this article? Which one was it that I showed you? I know we had an article that you and I were talking about where they specifically went to they brought up the 4chan message board.
That's the first one I talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. Where they talked about the 4chan message board. For those of you who don't know, it's just this like, it's a message board. It's a message board. It doesn't, they talk about how that's the root of all these horrifying conspiracy theories and all this stuff. Right. And I'm saying to myself,
4chan is out there, but
yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. But these people are the World Economic Forum.
Right.
They have millionaires and billionaires and all. And so they're scared of 4chan, the 4chan message. Most people have never even heard of it. They're like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And so now I can't tell if these guys are like truly nefarious Bond villain types, trying to take over the world. They certainly look the part and have the money, or if they're like the rich kid villain in every 80s teen movie that you've ever seen. Wreaking havoc on the school, driving in their cars, picking on kids. But then at the end of the movie, some, nerd punches one of them in the face and they go crying back to mom and dad. Like, I honestly can't tell who these people are anymore because they run away so quickly. And maybe the best example of it, and I don't think we have the ability to bring this up quickly, but when after we worked so hard to explain to people what the Great Reset is, in their own words, what the World Economic Forum and others who are affiliated believe about the Great Reset, when they finally had their Great Reset conference that had been pushed back because of COVID forever, they finally had this big conference with these elites, and they played this elaborate video basically apologizing for coming up with the slogan.
We have the video.
Reset.
Let's play it right now. We played this before, but
like...
this is too great to not play again. Go ahead, Andy. Let's play this clip. Ah, no audio. Oh, there it is.
We can reshape the world in ways we couldn't before. Ways that better address so many of the challenges we face. And that's why so many are calling for a great reset. A great reset? That sounds more like buzzword bingo masking some nefarious plan for world domination. Hands up, this kind of slogan hasn't gone down well. But all we really want to say is that we all have an opportunity to build a better world. And it's not surprising that people who've been disenfranchised by a broken system and pushed even further by the pandemic will suspect global leaders of conspiracy. But the
Yeah. So, oh, does this sound like a conspiracy? Whoops, we're sorry. That's one of my favorite videos.
It's so absurd. And we didn't get to the part. You stopped Andy before we got to the part, but there's a part coming up where they then show all the smiling faces of the Great Reset that should make us realize that they're actually not that bad, that they're all in it for us, actually.
Oh, right.
And among the smiling faces on there is Vladimir Putin himself. That didn't age very well. So even in their Great Reset apology video, they've got tyrannical, authoritarian warmongers. It's like they can't do anything right. They legitimately cannot do anything right.
So, Jim, I mean, this is one kind of piece of evidence that it seemed like the World Economic Forum were reacting, like Justin said, to stuff that we've done. They've run away from the Great Reset name. They were having a conference that was going to be named the Great Reset, and they changed it. They changed it to like the Davos agenda or something like that. Justin has had pieces published in big publications that the World Economic Forum has challenged and tried to get the publishers to take down. So we know that they react to stuff that we do. So, Jim, what is it? Are they the nefarious Bond villains, that we kind of suspect that they are? Or are they the 80s, the 80s teenager bad boy with the new leather jacket?
Well, yeah, I didn't like Justin making that analogy, since I'm the oldest here and remember my 80s movies. And so I think that's a grave insult to William Zabaka, the greatest actor, teenage actor of villains in the 80s movies of all time. Look it up. He was in Cobra Kai and others. But I think look, these are the Bond villains. What I find amazing, aside from that video where they realized that their messaging was horrid, that people will be reflexively suspicious, if not horrified, by the term the Great Reset, which, again, they had this agenda before COVID ever happened. It was ready to go, and they just were not going to blow that opportunity. But a hallmark of every totalitarian regime is this kind of hypersensitivity to criticism. In a free country, you are allowed to criticize your leaders. You're allowed to say what you like. And if they don't like it, they can go pound sand. In an authoritarian regime, if you criticize the leader, you could be thrown in jail or worse. And, that's not to say the United States hasn't had presidents who are a little testy when it comes to the way they're talked about in public. Barack Obama was one of them, even instructed a columnist at the New York Times to stop making fun of his big ears. And they happily obeyed because he's a Democrat. But again, they don't want you to talk. I actually really even can't figure this out. Maybe Justin and Chris can help me figure this out. So they need to get together for these big global summits. They need to keep everybody on the same page, because you can't have a big global initiative. You can't have a big global agenda without all these leaders in all these countries being on board. And you do that by bringing them together, flying them in on private jets, wining and dining them. They're not eating cricket steaks. They're eating actual, Wagyu steaks, the finest food in the world, to keep them on board, to keep the agenda moving forward. Yet at the same time, they try to pretend that this agenda doesn't exist. I don't know how you can do both. I figure maybe they're just trying to run a scam that if they can keep and we have another clip coming up soon about, they are worried about social unrest and people protesting in the streets against this agenda. So that's why they're doing all this tamping down, because they have to keep everybody calm enough until, frankly, it's too late to turn around.
Well, let's go ahead and play that last clip because I do want to reserve the rest of the episode for our kind of main topic. This is only supposed to be the intro part.
Well, Johnny, just real quick, can I just piggyback a little bit off of what Jim was just saying?
Sure.
I'm just going to make some parallels to what's happening here in the United States. Whenever the left comes out with a position that is questionable, they are unwilling to allow any satire. So like Babylon Bee, when they start like questioning, whether the woman of the year can be a transgender male, what happens to them? They get kicked off of Twitter. So I think it's this thin skin mentality that these people possess, because they know that their policy positions are so superficial and so hollow that as soon as you start poking holes in them, that they are going to that those policy positions are going to be exposed to common sense oriented people. So that's why the World Economic Forum or the CDC or these giant institutions that have so much power, why are they going after these these individuals or organizations like the Heartland Institute when they are so much more powerful than us? I mean, the World Economic Forum's resources dwarf the Heartland Institute's resources. Yet they seem to be very, very worried and concerned about when we just point out, hey, this is what you guys are actually doing. Hey, everybody, look what they're actually doing. So I think it shows that they are trying to hide the reality of what they're pushing. And they are just so, scared of anyone poking fun at it, and especially using satire to expose it.
Yeah, like Justin made a very careful point, carefully made this point when he was talking earlier, is that we go out of our way to direct quote these people. We go out of our way to show the videos of them talking because the things that they say sound so crazy that if we paraphrase them, people wouldn't believe us. So that's why we direct quote them so much. That's why we play these clips of Klaus Schwab. Andy, go ahead and play that other clip that we have of this guy that looks like
Here's the objective. What kind of world do we want to build? What do we know? What did we learn? I think the world which we want to create with the Great Reset has to be much more resilient. It has to be because security, people will demand more security. Physical security, health security. If we want to avoid some kind of social revolutions, and we have seen the signs of anger on the streets already the last weeks, so we have to address this issue to create a stronger inclusiveness. And finally, more sustainable. The next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.
Oh, shoot. The climate crisis, of course. All of this is predicated on that. So I just want everyone that's listening to this, sound off in the comments. I'm very curious of what your opinion is. Given the two, are they the Bond villains, or are they actually just the high school bullies in an 80s movie? Sound off. I'm very curious of what your response is. Justin, I'll give you the final word on this topic, but keep it short because I do want to get to our next topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing for people to take away is that it is so important to have video clips of people, to have audio clips of people, to use their own words, because it is very, very, very hard, no matter how powerful people are, when they're caught being authoritarians, it's hard for them to run away from that. And they're scared of it. And it shows that regular people, especially in the modern era where we have the internet and we have citizen journalism and we have organizations like the Heartland Institute and Stopping Socialism and all the things we've been doing, we actually can have an impact. You don't have to be the World Economic Forum to have an impact. You don't have to be in government to have an impact. A lot of this stuff that we've done over the past couple of years has really just been a handful of people doing really intense research, getting it into the hands of other people with very large microphones, right. And it's made a giant impact. So these people are scary, to be sure, but the reason they're afraid is because they know that if they get exposed, they're going to lose their power eventually. And then that ultimately is the most terrifying thing for them. So we should be concerned. We should be worried. We should respect the power and influence that they have, but we shouldn't shy away from shining a spotlight on it, because that has proven to work and be effective. We're actually winning this battle in some ways, which seemed inconceivable 2 or 3 years ago. So,
right. And there's definitely an appetite among the people to learn about this stuff, as your book, shot to #1 on Amazon and New York Times bestseller list, being one of the first books to expose the Great Reset. So that shows that people are interested in this and they want to learn about it. But the architects of the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, United Nations, and these other organizations, they don't want the people to learn the truth about it. That's why they are so concerned when people like Justin and others and Glenn Beck get out there and spread the word about what they're actually trying to do.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of the people sounding off think that they're going the Bond villain route. So maybe we shouldn't step off the gas and think that these people are less than what they are. I don't know. We'll see. We'll talk about it more surely in future episodes. But I want to move on. I want to move on to what I thought was going to be our main topic of the day, which is the fact that just the other day, Joe Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act. As we've discussed before, this bill has nothing to do with reducing inflation. The name was just a lie so that they could pass legislation filled with massive subsidies for wind and solar and electric vehicles. We've discussed in previous episodes. The subject was covered in last week's episode of Climate Change Roundtable. So if you're interested in that, go back and watch those episodes. But I wanted to focus on a couple of macro trends that are becoming increasingly impossible to ignore. The first one being, all of this green stuff, whether it's intended to be or not, is just a money-making scam. Now, we could talk about the subsidies that will now pour into the politically connected green energy companies. We can retread the stories about Solyndra and the failed solar farms in the desert. But the Inflation Reduction Act has already given us another example to talk about. So in the legislation, people will now be able to cash in on a new $7,500 electric vehicle tax credit. So now when Pete Buttigieg tells you to buy a $60,000 EV when gas prices go up, you'll only have to pay $52,500 to roll off the lot in the new car. Well, Jim, you brought this to my attention, so why don't you finish this story? What did Ford do in light of this new $7,500 tax credit?
Yeah, they raised their prices by, wait for it, $7,500 or even a little bit more. When this happened, I was like, as it was being contemplated, I was like, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, does anybody looked at how what has happened to college tuition prices over the last 30 years? Every time politicians say college is unaffordable, we need to give kids money so that they can go to college, or make it easier for them to take out loans. In fact, we'll even federally guarantee those loans. And what has happened since I was in college, and I graduated in 1992, was that the more that the government subsidized college tuition, the higher the tuition went. College tuition inflation is like this, while regular inflation was like this. The exact same thing was going to happen with this. I knew it was going to happen. I think I said it on this podcast or another one. And then lo and behold, literally the day after the bill was signed, or even before it was signed, I think they raised their prices the same way. It's like, I think one of the subsidies actually is to get, I think it's $7,500 for a new, and I guess an electric vehicle has to qualify. I don't think you get to use it on a Hummer or even maybe like the top line Tesla, but something. You get $7,500 for a new electric vehicle, and I think it was $5,000 for a used electric vehicle. Who the hell is going to buy a used electric vehicle? The batteries on these things are diminished already. I mean, at absolute maximum range, you might go 250 miles with it. Try getting who wants to buy a used Nissan Leaf that's like 7 years old with a $5,000 credit? You'll be lucky to get that thing to work and back if you live 10 miles from work. I mean, this whole thing was completely predictable. Everything in this bill is a payoff to the so-called green energy industry in this country. It is mostly for companies that don't need it or individuals that don't need it. Bill Gates had a lot to do with passing this bill, by the way, which we might get into here a little bit later. But this has always been a big payoff. There's really nothing. We're going to talk about nuclear power too, but there's nothing in this bill that does anything to help Americans. But it does help big donors to the Democrat Party, which are all these these green scam artist companies.
Yeah, this is just real. This is such a great story because for a variety of reasons, but the biggest is that when you're looking at, let's just take basic economic principles, right? Because clearly there's no just basic understanding of economics within the Democratic Party anymore. Maybe by the end of this, maybe you'll think differently. All right. But the reason prices are the way they are is because that business, so in this case, Ford, has figured out that this is what people are willing to pay of the money that they have access to. This is what they're willing to pay for a car. So if you add a subsidy, a giant subsidy to it that comes from a government, or a tax credit or whatever. So now people have more money to spend on it. The amount of money that they are spending is still theoretically willing to spend on an electric car is still theoretically the same. So now they've got the tax credit on top of, let's say they're willing to spend $50,000 on an electric car. All right. Now they have a $7,500 tax credit. So now they're willing to spend $57,500 on that car. That's how economics works, because for them, it's still $50,000 that they're willing to spend. Nothing has changed. They're not all of a sudden going to say, well, I'm still only willing to spend $50,000, because now they have $57,500 available to them. This is basic economics. So when the price of the car goes up to $57,500, to match the fact that the demand from the consumer is that they're willing to pay $50,000, and now they have an additional $7,500 coming from the government that they're willing to pay, the average number of cars sold doesn't go up because nothing's changed. You haven't actually increased demand for the vehicle. You're just moving. All you've done is given Ford a bunch of extra money, $7,500 per car. That's what you've done. So then what the government does is this. They say, well, okay, we're not selling more electric cars. The problem is we didn't give people a big enough tax credit. If only we had given them more money, then they would have bought more cars. So they give more money. This is exactly what Jim's point was about college. It's exactly what has happened with college. Okay, tuition's too high. So let's give people more money, or make it easier for people to get money so that it makes it easier for them to go to college. But all that does is signal to the college they can keep increasing prices. So next time around, they'll come and say, if we just give another 10 grand in tax credits, we'll get more cars sold. And Ford says, great, we'll raise our prices by $10,000. And all that happens is Ford keeps making more and more money, subsidized from the government, in this giant cronyist scheme. And don't think for a second that there aren't lobbyists for the auto industry and the auto workers pushing for these things to happen, because why would they, right? If the way it works is simply, well, now there's a $7,500 tax credit, so prices stay exactly the same, then why would Ford care? It doesn't help Ford, right? Makes no difference to them. The reason they care is because now they get to raise their prices and make more money. It's a giant scheme to give these big corporations massive amounts of money, of taxpayer money. And now you're in a situation where if you're a taxpayer who doesn't buy an electric car, you're really screwed, because you're now paying for a tax credit that you're not even going to use. Yeah. And on and on and on and on it goes forever.
For some upper middle class person buying a Tesla.
and then in 5 years, these same Democrats who push this bill through will be decrying these corporations for taking advantage of tax loopholes that they put into the law. It's a cycle that goes round and round and round, man.
And how will they prove it? They'll point to the profits. They'll say, look at all the profits they've made. The profits come from you. You printed the money and gave it to them. And that's, yes, except they've already spent all that money. So now they're just inventing it out of thin air, and we're paying for it through inflation. Exactly. That's really how it's happening. But it's like, this is just the way, and it's not just this one thing. This is the way everything works now. Every single thing works this way. It is a giant scam.
Exactly.
Donnie,
Chris, I want to go to you next, but I have to tee up this this conversation about nuclear power, because this is the other kind of macro trend that I wanted to discuss, that the left continues to reject nuclear power. As we've discussed, nuclear power is much more green, much more carbon sensitive than wind and solar. It's far more reliable than wind and solar. It's far more equipped to power a modern economy than wind and solar, yet the left runs away from it. So I saw this article that was written by our own Linnea Lucan that was published in the American Thinker. It was titled "Greens Should Embrace Nuclear Microreactors," and it made me want to talk about this. Because in the piece, she talks about the Inflation Reduction Act, and she talks about the various subsidies offered to the energy sectors. And according to an analysis that she cites, it says that wind and solar stands to receive $113 billion in tax credits by 2031. Amazingly, oil and gas activities also get some money, $29 billion. But poor old nuclear power just gets the scraps, $3.4 billion. The piece then goes on to talk about some of the arguments that we've discussed here about how much more environmentally harmful wind and solar is, and talks about how the Pentagon approved microreactors that are even safer than our typical nuclear power. Yet, despite all of this, the left still seems extremely disinterested in all of this. So, I mean, Chris, we've had this conversation before where it's like we know that there's like the levels of people that are kind of pushing for all of this green energy, renewable energy, I put those in quotes, and that the people, there's some element of people that are true believers. They really think that this is the route forward. And then there's people way up at the World Economic Forum that, I suggest that are kind of using this all as a ruse to get more control over society and the economy. But then I think that there's all of these people that we just talked about, Ford and other ones that are stand to get all the, the Solyndras of the world that stand to get all of these subsidies, that are just doing it for the money. So what's your point of view on all this?
Okay, well, I kind of want to just, pivot back to what we were talking about earlier. And I want to just put a little different perspective on this. As we can see, the American people are struggling. 2/3 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Food pantries are, overwhelmed by people who literally cannot afford to put food on the table. I could just, go on and just, cite endless statistics showing, how much the average American is struggling. Okay. And then on CNN, right after the bill was signed, Jennifer Granholm, the energy secretary, was on. And she was being interviewed about how this is going, how the Inflation Reduction Act and these energy tax credits are going to help, the everyday Americans. And she was saying, well, if they spend, $70,000, then they're going to get this, $7,500, tax credit for, a vehicle or a, new washing machine or, whatever, solar panels on their homes. But that just goes to show, and I mean, you guys hit on this, but I just really want to just emphasize this, how out of touch they are and how much they just don't care about the plight of struggling Americans due to their economic policies that have put us in this position. Americans are barely able to put gas in their car, barely able to put clothes on, their kids' backs these days. People are having trouble just buying enough school supplies for their kids to go back to school. And these people are so out of touch. And, their only response is, well, go buy a new EV and we'll give you a tax subsidy. It's just, it is so frustrating, but it goes to show how out of touch they are with the American people. And on this nuclear thing, it just boggles my mind why they do not embrace nuclear as a viable alternative to coal or even fossil fuels, because nuclear is safe. It is affordable. And we can, obviously, use nuclear to in our power grid, if they truly want to, stem carbon dioxide emissions.
Right.
But they don't want to do that because there's not a bunch of money to be made in nuclear power like there is with their, green energy, scams that they've been running since the Obama administration.
Well, Jim, I mean, we've talked about these stories before about like in Europe and Germany specifically about like just skyrocketing energy prices and all of this. Yet, despite that, and despite being like cut off from Russian oil that Germany is like completely dependent on, they're still going to move forward with shutting down the country's 3 remaining nuclear plants. And then like California, who suffers like rolling blackouts just about every year now, they're still looking to close down some of their nuke plants there. Like and in both of these cases, it appears as though like Germany and California might be reversing course on this, but not out of like a change of heart, but pure desperation. So like, why, Jim? Like the question is why? Like this bugs me to no end. Why they'll pursue wind and solar despite all of the problems, yet they'll just completely ignore, flat out reject nuclear power. Give me a theory. Why?
I think Chris nailed it. And because there's no scam money to be made out of nuclear. Nuclear power actually works. Nuclear power does not require land area the size of California to power the entire state of California to power. I think only to power the United States for only 43% of the time at absolute peak capacity, which is what wind generally gives you. Because there's just no scam money in nuclear power. You build a nuclear power plant, and it's on a pretty small footprint, and it'll run for decades with no trouble, and it will give people cheap, plentiful energy. It's a wonderful thing to have in a very diverse electric grid because it can basically be counted on to never give you any trouble and to always be on and to be, again, creating energy in the cheapest possible way. Germany, I believe, is bringing their 3 nuclear plants back online. This is after... this is because they wanted to go pretty much all wind. Energy Vende is the name of their program that's been going on for almost a decade now, and it's been such a disaster. They're actually firing up coal plants again because they have no choice. And now they're actually going to keep their nuke plants. And again, the dumbest thing in the world. I mean, we are ruled by morons all across the earth. Germany wants to decommission all of their nuke plants because of Fukushima, as if there's going to be a tsunami that's going to take out their nuke plants about 300 miles inland or something. I don't know. It's ridiculous. So I think Germany is putting those back on because they have no choice. And California, I used to live in Southern California, and I would drive from Los Angeles to San Diego on the 5 freeway, as they call it. And about halfway there, you would look to your right and you would see a nuclear power plant right on the ocean. I think it's called the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. And I believe I just saw a story this week that California had been planning to decommission that nuke plant for, I don't know, at least a decade, but for quite a while. It was a done deal. Mm-hmm. I told you yesterday, Donnie, it's like, I bet all the employees, they've already packed all their stuff in boxes and are ready to go. Right. But no, we need to keep it on because California is going to run out of power if they try to rely on the wind and solar and all the other, and unicorn poop and pixie dust and all other stuff they think it creates energy in this country. And why I think you're going to see, I guess maybe a resurgence in the idea of nuclear power plants, and this has been talked about for a long time, the story by Linnea that you put on the screen, these, basically micro nuke plants that are, not designed, like there's a nuclear power plant in Limerick, Pennsylvania. I used to live in Pennsylvania too. I used to drive past that all the time in Eastern PA, and it's this enormous nuclear plant, and it basically powers up all of Eastern Pennsylvania. And that's probably not the future of nuclear plants, maybe 20, 30 years from now, but micro ones that just power one city or even just neighborhoods or that stuff. There's lots of technology that we can advance if we want to embrace it. And the reason I think we're going to go that way is because the alternative is that they may outlaw fossil fuels, but you'll still be able to light a torch and bring your pitchfork and get these guys out of office for keeping everybody in the dark and cold all the time. There is a real danger. Klaus Schwab said it in the clip we played earlier, that they are concerned about civil unrest and people in the streets overthrowing their government and their authority, which is why they try to have to keep them just comfortable enough to keep that from happening. Well, and keeping these nuke plants on is a way to make sure that does happen, that people have just enough power to survive.
So Justin, Chris and Jim have focused more in on just like the money that could be just funneled into these things. And I think that's probably largely like at that level, the reasoning for this. But call me a conspiracy theorist. I'm sorry. I'll put that warning out there right now that like I feel like this has more to do with just the control of society. And it's a lot easier to control society when there's abundant scarcity as compared to abundance. In a world of abundance and everyone's doing well off, Like, nobody wants to be controlled. I'm doing well off, get off my back type of thing. But in a world where we're limited, when there's a lot more scarcity, there's not as much energy, energy's expensive and all of that, it really kind of ushers in this dependence on people, on the system, and on the government. And I think that that's the reason why that we're pursuing wind and solar so much, is because those people that want that control know that it's going to push us towards a world of more scarcity as opposed to abundance, and nuclear wouldn't do that. That would be the pathway to abundance. What do you think? Am I gone off the deep end? Do I need to put on a tinfoil hat?
I mean, I think that the left, there are always lots of different motivations on the left for all kinds of policy positions that they take. And I think that there is a element of the left, especially the very far environmentalist part of it, that does not want truly affordable, truly abundant energy. That they don't, especially clean energy. They don't want that, because what it means is it will become much easier to build. And the more you build, the more nature you destroy. The more nature you destroy, the more the planet cries out, and we have to bow down to Mother Earth and blah, 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 blah. So they don't want that. In fact, the things that they often talk about are if you get into the really far edges of this, are things like rewilding, where we literally move humans out of communities and allow nature to just sort of reconsume these areas, sort of like what happened in Chernobyl, for example, right? That obviously happened because of the nuclear disaster, but the same effect.
Good
if you
example.
Look at pictures of Chernobyl, yeah. If you look, it's very. If you look at pictures of Chernobyl, it's like it's full of plants and trees, and like there's deer walking around, and I think that's what
With
a lot of
8
people
heads.
left want. Yeah. But I would argue that the main reason that people on the left are not calling for nuclear energy is because it's not a jobs program. And that's the real thing. See, with wind and solar, you need to build such vast infrastructure to make that work. And you need to completely overhaul the entire system. With nuclear, you don't really need to do that. You just need to build plants in the right spots and hook it up to the electric grid, and it'll work out fine. But the amount of building you have to do and infrastructure you'd have to do to actually run the country mostly on wind and solar would be so vast and so expensive and require so many jobs that they can sell it as a jobs program, as a way to justify doing this really crazy thing, right? And I think there are a couple of reasons why you get people who want to do that. Obviously, there's political benefits to it and everything else. But I also just think that the left, generally speaking, has no idea how to actually have economic growth within their philosophy. It's not possible.
Right.
Everything becomes the broken window fallacy, where we just run around destroying things that already work and then rebuilding them to have a jobs program. And that is essentially, this is the greatest, the Green New Deal type idea, where we're going to destroy every part of our energy industry, or almost all of it, rebuild it completely from scratch, is the greatest broken window fallacy program that's ever been conceived of. And one of the biggest jobs programs ever created. That's why they call it the Green New Deal, like the New Deal, right? In the 1930s. So why do they want to do this? Because it would require millions of people working, in effect, directly or indirectly, for the government. It would require massive jobs programs and all the benefits that come from the government making these elaborate promises. I think that's really what's at the heart of all of this. I think it's mostly about jobs.
But that goes to that dependence. That means that society is dependent on the government and this overarching ruling class, because they need those jobs, right? I don't know, Chris. You wanna jump in on this?
I think Justin brings up a really important and interesting point here with the New Deal, because before the New Deal, the footprint of the federal government was minimal. After the New Deal, the federal government's relationship to the people changed fundamentally, and I think that the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders, they said, "Wow, look what FDR was able to do with the New Deal after the Great Depression 100 years ago. Let's do that again after COVID, but this time, instead of doing the Civilian Conservation Corps and all that kind of stuff, we'll just hire hundreds of thousands of Americans to become government workers to build, these make work programs. I think that's a very interesting point, and I think that definitely is relevant here. And also, after the New Deal, the Democratic Party's constituency changed fundamentally as well. They had a whole bunch of new constituencies that were previously Republican voters that became New Deal Democrats, and those New Deal Democrats voted Democratic for generations. And I think that they see the writing on the wall, and they're saying, we need another one of these ways to get a whole new generation of people on board with our agenda. So what's the easiest way to do that? Make work programs and also increasing the welfare state, which is also happened extensively under the New Deal and under FDR. And they were pursuing the same thing on steroids.
Yeah, the difference is the New Deal actually built stuff. The Tennessee Valley Authority actually brought electricity and modern world to Appalachia. We built the Hoover Dam. We wouldn't be able to do any of that stuff today. So all this Green New Deal make work projects really is stuff that is not very productive and doesn't do any good for society. In fact, it will harm society. If they really go through with building all of these solar farms and wind farms out there, the ecological devastation that will wreak on this country, it's really even hard to contemplate or to quantify. Anyway, that's just a big distinction, I think. I mean, the New Deal, like it or not, they actually did stuff. They got stuff done, and things that are actually
but it also misallocated, capital, and it prolonged the Great Depression and made it worse. And they're going on the same track here. Instead of saying after the COVID-19 pandemic and, the government created a recession that, was part and parcel to that, they're saying, well, let's just double down on the New Deal, which is just going to prolong the economic pain that we're all experiencing.
Yep, we are long here. We're already past the hour mark, everybody. So like I mentioned in the first topic, I do want people to kind of sound off in the comments below this video. I'm very interested to see what you think about the left's rejection of nuclear power and why they're doing that. So yeah, sound off in there. I'm very curious to what you think, but I do want to thank everyone for tuning into this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Like I said, for those audio-only listeners that are probably catching this on a Friday, you can join us a day earlier on Thursdays at noon Central Time for the live show that's being streamed on Facebook and Twitter and Rumble and YouTube, where you can join in the conversation, leave your comments and questions. Maybe we'll show your comment on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. Also, if you'd like to hit that subscribe button, write a review for us, it'd be greatly appreciated. Share this content, leave a comment, all things that you could do to help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. And if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for the show, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and visit benefit.heartland.org to come to our benefit dinner October 21st.
Fantastic. Justin, same question.
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Getter, and all the other social media platforms.
Fantastic. And Chris, what do you have to pitch today?
StopInSocialism.com. We got some news stories about ESG and the Inflation Reduction Act, so please go check them out. And I just want to also tell the viewers, please come to the benefit dinner. It'd be really cool to meet everybody in person and get to know them more intimately.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.
And what am I doing here?